Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to let the public in Indonesia to know the reasons behind the decision taken by President Putin, first of all, to recognize officially the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, and also to start the military operation. Actually, it goes back to 2014, when after an illegitimate and bloody coup d'etat in Kiev, a very Russophobic government with the support of the Western powers came to power in Ukraine. And the first thing it did, it started to oppress the Russian population. And in Ukraine, as you may know, around 40% of population think of themselves as ethnic Russians. All Ukrainians can speak Russian, and there are many regions in Ukraine that are predominantly Russian-speaking, including Lugansk, Donetsk, and Crimea, of course. And the first thing this government tried to do was to, for instance, ban Russian language. How can you ban Russian language in Ukraine? It's like, I don't know, banning English language in Ireland or banning Javanese language in Java. So, of course, there was resistance from the people in Ukraine. They were Ukrainian nationals, but they thought of themselves, they think of themselves as Russians. And not only that, you know, not only cultural discrimination, but there were physical threats. This government in Kiev started to support Nazi ideology. You know that Nazi ideology is banned everywhere in the world since the end of World War II, when the Nazis were defeated, actually by our country. Together with we were part of one country at that time, Ukraine and Russia. But despite the norms and rules of international law, the Nazi ideology was very much supported by the Ukrainian government, and they directed these Nazi groups against Russians. So only for speaking Russian you could have been beaten, or you could have been deprived of your work. You could have been attacked. So people in Lugansk, Donetsk, and Crimea, they opposed this kind of policies. While Crimea, as you know, went back to Russia, it had a referendum and decided to rejoin Russia, and we accepted them and protected them against these attacks. Lugansk and Donetsk remained a part of Ukraine. And Ukrainian army, together with the Nazi groups, started attacking these regions. And they were killing people. You know, when now the Western media are crying over Ukrainians, why didn't they cry all these 8 years about people being killed in Lugansk and Donetsk every single day? Our Ministry of Defense has stated that during these 8 years, around 16,000 people were killed in Lugansk and Donetsk. It means every day people were dying. And not many Western media, or I doubt that a single Western media has showed, for instance, the so-called Alley of Angel in Donetsk. It's a memorial to children that were killed in Donetsk by Ukrainian army. I told you about that, you know, we can send you some absolutely awful photos from these times with the, you know, just ordinary people being killed and wounded in these two regions. You know, one of the most impressive photos, and it became a sort of symbol of resistance of these two regions. It's the photo that was called the Madonna of Gorlovka, because there's a photo of a young woman killed, lying in a pool of blood with her baby. Their condition was really awful. We tried, as I told you, for 8 years. We tried to solve it by peaceful means. Unfortunately, we failed. Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Of course, if the Ukrainian government wished only to eliminate this kind of ideology, they had all the means to do so. But in fact, they supported it. And just one, the Azov battalion, the Aidar battalion, there was one character during World War II who was very active in supporting the Germans in Ukraine, Stepan Bandera. And now he became the national hero of Ukraine. You know, it's unthinkable, because we fought together with the Ukrainians during World War II against the same enemy, and it was Nazi. And now they are supporting this ideology. It is banned in Europe. It is banned in Russia. How can it not be banned in Ukraine? And not only it's, you know, as I said, it's a cultural oppression or political oppression, but they were killing people. They were attacking people. It's his choice. Of course, not only he's Jewish, but actually he was, before becoming the president of Ukraine, he was a very popular actor, a comedian. In Russia, he was very popular. But of course, Zelensky is not an independent politician. Of course, all his actions actually are controlled by the West. So whatever he says or does, he's not free in his actions. We do understand that, because he's totally controlled by the Western powers. So Russia's position at that time was that this conflict within Ukraine, it was a civil war within Ukraine, should be solved by peaceful means. And we urged actually the leadership of Donetsk and Lugansk to sit together with Ukrainians, with the Ukrainian government, and find a peaceful solution to this conflict. And as you know, in 2014, 2015, the so-called Minsk agreements were signed that presented a very clear roadmap what to do in order to solve this conflict within Ukraine. First of all, of course, not to use weaponry against each other, of course, to retract all the military equipment, and also to change the law of Ukraine to give a special status to these two regions, but again, inside Ukraine. For 8 years, we've been urging Kiev to fulfill the agreements. For 8 years, we've been asking our Western partners to also try to urge Kiev to fulfill these agreements. It never happened. It never happened. Still, there were people dying in Lugansk and Donetsk every day. On the other hand, the West started to pump military equipment into Ukraine, training Ukrainian army, and turning Ukraine into an anti-Russian project. So, in fact, Ukraine stopped becoming an independent state. It became a political and even a military instrument in the hands of West that was directed against Russia. And also, there were promises that Ukraine will be part of NATO. As you know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the West promised us that NATO will not expand to Russia's borders because the military alliances of the former Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, was dissolved, no more. So we asked our Western partners that NATO should not expand to our borders. They promised us, yes, they said, okay. We asked them for a written agreements. They said, no, 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 you just believe our word. We believed them, but it never happened. You know that from 1999 to 2021, there were 5 rounds of expansion of NATO to our borders. And what it means for us, if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, it means that all the military infrastructure of NATO, including nuclear arms, could come to our border. Only 3 minutes and the missile will reach Moscow. How can we not feel threatened? How can we not feel that our security is being threatened? And we told the West in these 8 years many times that there are red lines that shouldn't be crossed with Russia. We asked them not to drag Ukraine into NATO. We tried in December to have some sort of written security guarantees for Russia. We've been trying all diplomatic ways and means to actually prevent a major military conflict happening in Europe. You know, we are against war. We know what war is. War is a tragedy, of course. We suffered a lot during World War II. We lost 27 million lives in this war. We don't want any war happen. But this was maybe the only way now to prevent a bigger tragedy of happening, because Ukraine, supported by the Western powers, has amassed a lot of troops on the borders with Lugansk and Donetsk, and any second a military attack could have happened. So that's why our president has taken the decision, first of all, to recognize officially the independence of Lugansk and Donetsk. Until that point, we didn't recognize the independence. And then we signed a treaty of amity and cooperation with these 2 republics, which also provided for the military help of Russia to these 2 republics. So according to these commitments from our part, the president has taken it's a very hard decision to conduct this military operation. Once again, it's not a war. We are not conducting a war against people of Ukraine, because we see Ukrainians as our brothers and sisters. I was born in Ukraine myself. I'm not Ukrainian, but my father grew up in Ukraine. So it's not a war against Ukrainians. It's a military operation that has the goal to, first of all, protect the people of Lugansk and Donetsk, to restore their constitutional borders, to protect people of Russia against the bigger aggression, which we can see that NATO actually presents this threat to Russia, and also to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And our military of defense has stated many times, we are not targeting civilians. In the Western media, you can see a lot of fakes, you know, with the houses burning and bombed and shelled. It's not what we're doing. Actually, they are using some of the images that happened in Donetsk and Lugansk, and in fact was done by the Ukrainian army. So we are not targeting civilians. We are targeting just the military installations in Ukraine. Our Ministry of Defense declared that any Ukrainian military personnel who doesn't want to fight against Russians, against their brothers, they just can give up their arms and go home to their families. We will not be, trying to take revenge or anything. We don't want Ukrainians to suffer. Ordinary people, we don't want them to suffer. So once again, we are protecting Lugansk and Donetsk people. We are protecting Russian Federation. And according to international law and the UN Charter, actually, we have this right to protect ourselves. And we're seeking for demilitarization and de-nazi-fication of Ukraine. If we didn't believe in diplomatic solutions, we wouldn't agree to have talks with the Ukrainian side. And there was already one round of talks. And I don't know the details, but the head of our delegation said that they found some points of compromise. And the most important thing, they agreed to meet again. So if we didn't believe in diplomatic solutions, we would never agree to that. Well, I'm not a military expert. I can tell you just that, of course, we want to end it as soon as possible. We don't want human lives to be threatened and wasted. As I told you, we're not targeting civilians. Well, who is telling? Who is calling these names? And what about, as I told you, barbaric operation in Serbia, in former Yugoslavia? What about Libya? Libya was a very prosperous country. Okay, maybe the leader Gaddafi was not the most democratic in the Western sense of this word, leader. But under Gaddafi, Libya was a very prosperous and stable country. After the bombing of Libya by NATO again, what is Libya now? The country has been destroyed. People are dying every day. Okay, Libya, then Afghanistan. For 20 years, Americans have been killing people in Afghanistan. In Iraq, an aggression on false pretense. Do you remember this white powder produced by the then Secretary of State, saying that they have weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, and then saying, oh, no, we made a mistake. Yeah, but still the country was also practically destroyed. Very unlike what happened in Yugoslavia in 1999. When the Western leaders are saying that we have launched biggest military conflict in Europe since World War II, it's not true. Do you remember what happened in Yugoslavia? For 78 days, Serbia has been bombed. And not only military installations were bombed by NATO. They were hospitals, schools, bridges, homes of people. More than if I'm not mistaken, 2,500 people died at that time. And they were just civilians. I'm not saying that we are using the same ways, but just it's such a blatant example of double standards when if you bomb Yugoslavia, and they call it humanitarian intervention. So they bomb Yugoslavia in a very humanitarian way, and we are trying to spare civilians in Ukrainian, and they call it barbaric. Again, in Russia, you can ask any Russian, it hurts. Because Ukraine is our brother country. Ukrainians, again, they are not some, distant cousins. They are our brothers and sisters, and we feel like that. But to see Ukrainians brainwashed and being turned in an instrument against Russia, this is first absurd, and this, we cannot stand it anymore. We want Ukrainians to be free. We want to live in peace with our neighbors and brothers and sisters, at last, after so many years.